Good day. When you talk about consent, you usually talk about sharing the data that's derived from samples or from epidemiological studies or from data in large consortia. The Global Alliance for Genomics and Health has made its mission to develop strategies for responsible international data sharing. So I'm trying to share with you today some of the demonstration projects, tools, and so on that have been prepared that hopefully will allow us in the future to put together genetic data with clinical or health-related data. I'm going to start with what the Global Alliance does not do. It is not going to create a metadata set. It's not going to store data. It's not going to do research itself. It's not going to interpret genomes or care for patients or not share or make available on open access databases data with those who don't share. It will share, period. So its mission is to accelerate progress by building a common framework in a harmonized way, not standardized necessarily, but harmonized for responsible sharing of data, and to catalyze, to incite, to initiate data sharing projects, to support them and to promote them. Right now it stands at 267 member organizations, but if you're interested, it's now accepting individual members as well. So this will allow you to keep in contact with the Alliance, find out what it's doing and where you can support it or contribute or even criticize it. It's completely bottom up. So it's a group of volunteers from around the world. It's not formalized, it's not incorporated, it's volunteers from around the world that, directed by a steering committee, have divided themselves into 4 working groups: regulatory and ethics, data, security, clinical, and each of these working groups has under it an executive committee, working groups, as well as task teams, demonstration projects, and so on, which I will try to explain today. What's in the Constitution, what it means to become a member, is to adhere to the framework for responsible sharing of genomic and health-related data. I'm going to get back to why we did this and why we made this part of the Constitution and part of membership. Currently, there's 3 policies under development that go further than the framework, that are more detailed and help researchers and policymakers and patients and to understand what we mean by consent, by privacy and security, by accountability. And the first 2, consent and privacy and security, will be ready for the next GA4GH meeting in June. Accountability has just started. There are different projects. There's more than what you see on the slide here: the Beacon project, the BRCA reference database, and the Matchmaker project. Together, the framework, the policies, the projects, the task teams, and so on, all are developing tools to encourage and facilitate international interoperability. So what's different about this? Why is it just another group, a society, an association, a consortium? No, the framework that undergirds, that supports, and actually is sort of the raison d'etre, if you like, of the Alliance, is trying to shift away from the traditional bioethics approach or the legal approach about protecting patients and participants from possible harms. So we've sort of flipped it around, and we're trying to reactivate rights, human rights that were largely dormant. In particular, Article 27 of the 1948 Universal Declaration, which has since been signed and ratified, which means it's in force legally in 164 countries. So this Article 27 in 1948 said that everyone had the right to share in scientific advancement and its benefits. Now that is a right of all citizens, and also to have scientific freedom, but as scientists to be protected for their contributions, to be recognized as authors of their contributions. So it's a twin right between the right of citizens to benefit and the right of scientists to be recognized. So we would like, with this framework, to activate these human rights to give them meaning. As I said, they've very rarely been used in the past. So here are the large overarching aims of the framework. And what's interesting about it is if you look at the foundational principles, you'll say, what's new? This looks like another, bioethics declaration. What's interesting is that the foundational principles actually were the subject of a lot of discussion. How detailed should we be? How much instruction should we be giving in these foundational principles? We decided to sort of leave them simple and clear so they could be interpreted in different cultures according to different values and so on around the world, and let the policies provide further direction as to their interpretation. The framework does, however, present different core elements, each of them having a content of 3 or 4 high-level guidance to at least permit members who want to join the Global Alliance to understand what the core elements are that will allow us to share in a responsible way data in the future, including in the clouds, including across political boundaries, and so on. The framework has been translated into 5 languages: Arabic, Chinese, Japanese, English, French, and Spanish. And more recently, it says soon at the bottom of the slide, but Portuguese is done, and German and Greek are coming next. So if there are any volunteers in the audience who are one of the major languages of the world and would like to volunteer, they're all translated by volunteers and validated by volunteers. Please let me know. The more we can translate, the better. So let's look at some of these policies. Now, again, the framework is unique that it says that it presumes that consent has been obtained or that the protocol has been approved by an ethics body for data sharing. So we're starting one step past that wall that everyone seems to hit. But we do, in our consent policy, and I'll get back to it, do provide some guidance so that researchers who are using consented data and samples can actually check to make sure that they respect the wishes of participants. Privacy and security, again, also has something different in it from what you would usually find in a privacy and security document. And I think the most important, and you can read it all what's on the slide, but the most important are the idea of creating proportionate safeguards. So you don't put everything at the high level of super sensitive data, that you check and is the data really that sensitive? Will the benefits outweigh the risks and so on? And based on a realistic analysis, not hypothetical, what if one day someone does something somewhere. Accountability, as I mentioned, is just coming out of the gate. Interesting in this one is that it's sort of a governance ethics, but more if participants are going to trust, and that's the key element, trust in international data sharing across jurisdictions for research uses as yet perhaps not defined, although ethically approved. How can we make sure that there is a knowledge on the part of researchers of the sanctions or the in case there is abuse of data? On the other side, we're also going to say to researchers, if it's been consented to, why are you not sharing? In other words, we're going to sort of create a reverse burden of proof. If the participant has consented, why are you sitting on it? Now, there are 3 demonstration projects. The scientists in the audience will be more at ease with some of the details of these 3 projects that are being spearheaded, again, by volunteer scientists who are members of the Alliance. The first one, I can understand, it's a beacon, sort of like, is anyone out there that has a genome with A at a position such and such? And bing, someone around the world will answer yes or no. So they'll send out these beacons. Now, eventually, beacons will become more sophisticated and have different levels of information gathering. That's where, obviously, privacy and security interests will start to play a role. The BRCA challenge, the BRCA, as you know, the BRCA cancer gene, is going to create, or will attempt to create, an international federated database of all the breast cancer data that we already have, and to make it open, accessible, protected, but accessible, and a controlled access, and parts of it open. And in that way, I'll set up a database that is just as high in quality as some of them that are now available in the private sector. hopefully this will serve as a template for other projects who wish to do this for other diseases. And the Matchmaker Exchange, no, it's not for weddings, it's actually for matching phenotypic and genotypic data. And some of you will recognize the databases here from different institutions and universities and so on around the world. And if you have a gene and you're looking for a phenotype, or you have a phenotype and you're looking for a gene, you can actually join this Matchmaker Exchange. And particularly for rare diseases, this is extremely, extremely important. And there's a matchmaker in action. So what's to come? Well, there'll be more APIs. There's quite a number of them already. What everybody wants, machine-readable consents, best practices for genomic research in the cloud. I get this all the time. Everyone's worried. You're thinking surveillance, you're thinking NSA, you're thinking good guys, bad guys. And how can we ensure that we need the cloud? Because of the size of the data when you start combining whole data sets and both clinical and genomic. But how can we ensure that what's in the cloud is what we want to be in the cloud, protected in the cloud, and secure in the cloud at the quality that allow us to do our analyses in the cloud? So behind all this, in terms of the regulatory ethics and working group, and also helping the different demonstration projects, is the Public Population Project in Genomics and Society. Now, it started in 2005, helping biobanks set up prospectively to be able to share data in the future by creating harmonized tools. What it is doing now is actually offering these tools. So we've created the International Policy, Interoperability, and Data Access Clearinghouse. I'm glad it's written out on the slide, because this acronym always defeats me when I'm tired to remember what it stands for. And it has different components, which I'll show to you. But you can see here some of the projects already using the services of this clearinghouse as it supports the Global Alliance in its work. So it's created sort of a one-stop service. Suppose you are going in for Horizon 2020 grant in Europe, for instance, and you have 17 countries or researchers from 17 countries, and you want to know, can we work together? Or if we want to work together, what do we need? In other words, we already have data, can we share it? Or we want to make sure we can share. What kind of LC tools do we need? And then once you're working and you've set up your database and you have your project completed and you want people to start using your data, how can we make sure that researchers who seek access can actually be authenticated and be identified and so on and validated before they get access to the database, if it's a controlled access database. And finally, it's set up a whole series, if you like, of generic ethical, legal, social issues clauses that you can use for your consents, for your MTAs, for your confidentiality agreements, and customize them to your needs. And these are open, they're out there. So if you need them, go have a look. So to date, what have we done so far for the Global Alliance? Well, we've looked at 3 issues: legacy consents, the problem of people who consented in goodwill in 1990 and nobody talked about online cloud computing, no one talked about international data sharing, no one talked about potential commercialization. Then what if you want to start now and you need clauses now for your project for international data sharing, and even we provided a template for again that you can customize. So as I know this is a real problem, there's 4 questions that we ask. Was it even foreseen? It's not because the words aren't there that it wasn't in the spirit of the project to share across borders, or to have access to medical records, or to do genes or some research down the line that would make a link between environment and genes and so on. And perhaps one day to share with companies so that they can prepare the software, they can prepare products, devices, and drugs and so on that actually will allow you to have treatment and diagnoses. But there's no doubt that sometimes you have to have a reconsent if one of those conditions is missing, or the ethics committee says you need to reconsent. Or an ethics committee could say, well, wait a minute, this goes back to 1960. We can't reconsent 100,000 people. Half of them may have passed away. Why don't we send out a recontact and notify what we want to do, what you want to do as researchers, and allow people to opt out? Or if it's even a bigger issue of impracticability, feasibility, or cost, or whatever, or you could really upset people by contacting them, they might give you a waiver provided other conditions are met. We've also prepared clauses for international data sharing, and you can see some of the items there about privacy, about storage, about withdrawal. And finally, that generic consent form that I was telling you about. So I guess to conclude, what I really want to say is that there's a lot of goodwill here. People want to move from the spirit of the SNP consortium in 1990 that did the Human Genome Project to finally translating it by putting it together with genomic and with clinical data so as to see patterns, so as to contextualize diseases, so as to see what adding data from different diseases together, or across different diseases, or across different patients groups, actually allow us to move further from the lab to the bedside. But just in case you're not convinced yet of data sharing, I do have 2 doggies, but there's only one on this photo who tells you that in a very gentle and kind way that you should share your data. Thank you.